So now, let's say that you have a person that you know, right? Either a friend or a loved one or a relation or something who gets involved in one of these groups. They get sucked in, right? What do you do as a friend or a family member with such a person? How do you deal with that? Do you, oh my God! Well, you what? Should that be your reaction, or what should you?
No.
Okay, so what should you do in such a case?
Right. So instead of doing that, let me just say that that's human nature to say what, or haven't you heard about this group? And a lot of family and friends feel like they've blown it. And over the course of a couple decades, I've run groups for families and friends who have loved ones in cults, so I've been asked this question quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, by the time people come to the group, they feel like they've blown it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that's very, very important to do is, first of all, to really do your research and not just be very reactionary about just hearing the name of that group. Find out what you're up against. Find out what your loved one has gotten involved with and involved in. And maybe if you really have the time and the inclination, and I think it's wise, you want to not only do your research, but talk to people who have left it to find out why they did. Mm-hmm. And also how they were able to get out. There's a lot of information now that people can access, which is really wonderful.
I know when we spoke with Joe Zimhart on our podcast, he mentioned the idea when you're relating to a person who's in a group like this to get them to tell you about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably, I'm sort of thinking as we're talking right now, that might be a good initial reaction.
Mm-hmm.
When you're, hey, I just got involved, I'm a Scientologist now, right?
Right.
Instead of saying, oh my God, you mean you believe in space aliens, right?
Exactly.
Or, something else equally off-putting. Instead, simply say, oh. And, again, this is sort of like, forewarned, I guess, but like, oh, well, what have you done with it? Mm-hmm. Oh, what is it about that you certainly you've seen in the media, some things about that. What do you think about that? Try to keep a positive and information gathering sort of.
Yes. So what I try to tell people to do is to be as calm as possible, and also to be wondering out loud. I wonder what that's about, and what your experience has been like, and can you teach me? You are not the expert necessarily in that conversation. That's not going to go over well if you come across as knowing more. You want to, whether or not you feel that you do know more, and chances are, being outside the group, you know much more about it that's true and real and accurate than people in it. But you don't want to come across that way. You don't want to come across as really talking down to the person and like somehow you just don't get it. I have the information, you don't. That is not a good angle. And so to say, oh, I've heard about that group. I'm really wondering about it. Can you tell me what your experience has been like? Can you tell me what the philosophy is, or what the technology is, or what the belief system is? Who have you met there? What has your experience been like? And just gather information. The reason you also want to gather information is that it gives you insight into what seems to be working for that person who you love, why it is that they're involved in it. Because if the first thing they say is, oh, well, I feel like I've really made a lot of good friends and I have a new community, and that's top of their list, then that gives you a sense of understanding about what it is that's really working for them in that group and why it is that they were attracted to it, and that's probably more important than even the belief system. So you also then have to be sure that no matter what they say, you don't say, oh, how could you believe that? Or do you really think it's worth it to sacrifice everything for this? You don't question it, you just take in the information. And then you set up a time to talk again about it, so that really you let them know this is just the beginning of your conversations together. One of the reasons that you want to stay positive is that cults will want to demonize you. if you are someone who has any influence over this person and is not a member of it and doesn't seem to be interested in becoming a member of it, it's going to be very easy for the cult to encourage that person to cut off communication with you. And it's going to be even easier for the person to want to do it if you're at all negative, if you're at all critical. So you don't want to fall into that trap. And you can kind of out-manipulate the manipulators by being positive, because they're not expecting that. And so then if you're not a threat, this person can continue talking to you or can continue visiting you at your house or coming for a holiday or whatever else, because you haven't said anything bad. When a cult also talks about the world and talks about life in general, it's a very black and white way of thinking for the most part. So it's very easy for you to go to the dark side and never to return. In the cult's eyes and in that member's eyes, at least not for a long time. So again, you don't want to fall into that trap. It is also very good to ask yourself a couple of questions before you want to go ahead and talk to the person involved in the group. You want to remember sort of the who, what, when, where, and why questions. If it's a family system or if it's a group of friends, who would be the best person to bring up the conversation? Typically someone who that person has a very comfortable and safe feeling kind of relationship with. Sometimes a sibling rather than a parent, because a parent might trigger certain feelings of defensiveness where the child has to prove that they've made the best decision. And also which friend is least confrontative, and that would be the friend who would approach them first. What is what you bring up and what you really want to try to get across. Like, this is something that if this is important to the person who you like or love, it's important to you to really know about it. And when timing plays a huge role in the success of any kind of conversation. And so pick the timing well. If they're going through a particularly hard time, that's not the time to have a conversation that might be difficult. And you'll know that person well enough to know when might be a better time than another time. And I think where also. If you're going to have this conversation in a forum where they're with other members from the group, it's not really going to go well. Mm-mm. So you want to see if you can get them aside. You could even take them on a walk somewhere. Sometimes if you're sitting down having a conversation, it feels a little more like an interrogation. And so doing an activity together, and then you just happen to bring this up, so it feels like it was sort of an afterthought, is a nice way to do it. But again, to try to get them alone if possible. I know it's not always possible, but that's something that, you can call me about, and we can figure out ways to make it possible. And then why? Why are you bringing this up? Make sure you make that clear. That it's not to question them, it's not to doubt them, it's not to criticize them. It's because you care. It's because you love them. And they're doing something that you don't know a lot about and you'd like to know more.